your
And
concern.
we're in. We're all in. Welcome everybody to Working Lunch. As you can see, we were just sorting out some technical issues as we launch live now. First and foremost, May, can you hear us? Are you all right? Yeah, you're all. Can you hear us now?
Yes, but I'm just having some. Oh, it's working now.
Perfect. We're in. Well, listen, we always start the show with asking everybody what they have for lunch. I mean, I had the lunch of champions, which is cheese and crackers. Sam and I were just talking about how not to overload on bread during the course of the week.
It's my mistake. I've already had like a loaf today.
Oh, quality. And May, have you even had chance to have lunch yet? You've been super busy this morning, right? I doubt you have.
No,
Post-show.
But I'm looking forward to it. I don't know what I'm going to have yet. So cheese and crackers sounds good.
Yeah, I've just implanted that in your mind. Well, listen, we're good to go, and I think typically we give it a couple of minutes for everybody to join. But this is, for me, this is like a super exciting show to talk to you both about Gen Z and the lack of interaction / interest in LinkedIn. Very controversial. I'm keen to kind of get your further thoughts on this, because I'm sure there's people in the chat channel going, everybody uses LinkedIn. What do you mean Gen Z won't use it? And that's kind of what we got you both on here to talk about, because I think it's super important when you think about succession planning, right? In any business, the multiple generations in the workplace now, Gen Z are super important to the future of businesses, whether that be scale ups, SMEs. Yeah, Erica is a very provocative subject indeed, intentionally so to a degree, but there is a fair bit of quality behind it and thought process. But before we get into that, and without giving away too much around what Eric is, because I think I kind of almost want to reverse engineer that and start with the headline and then talk about what you both are doing to address it. But just short, sharp introductions. Who are you? Tell us who you are and what your role is within your company.
Okay.
Sam, you're first.
So I'm Sam. I am in charge of kind of influencers on our platform, and also the community. That, I guess, background wise, I used to work in the startup world. I'm a bit of like a kind of activist for people that didn't go to uni, because I didn't go to uni, so therefore hence the inspiration for me wanting to run Eric with May. So, but there's a little bit of sprinkling.
Segue in.
Yeah, I'm May. I'm the other co-founder, and also Sam and I are best friends. So we've known each other since we were 8 years old. I am, I guess, head of clients, kind of sales, business development, and yeah, I guess kind of my passion in terms of why I started Eric. I'm really keen for kind of representation and diversity, because coming from an Asian family, I only really had 3 options growing up in terms of my career: accountant, lawyer, and doctor. And I was actually an accountant for 3 years before Eric.
Wicked indeed. Well, we'll put a pin in the Eric piece just for the moment, because I'm super keen to hear from you both. First 2 questions, right? When we talk about Gen Z, who are we talking about? And secondly, more importantly, to Erica's point, more provocatively, why are they not using LinkedIn? Over to you both. Who wants to pick up the first question? Who are Gen Z?
Okay, so well, Gen Z is I know lots of people don't like the term Gen Z, and that's completely understandable. However, it is shorthand essentially for saying people under the age of 25, but people that are old enough at the same time to go into the working world or to be considering career options. So we're kind of talking, I suppose, more generically about next gen, but more specifically at this moment in time, Gen Z. So they are obviously kind of, between the age of 16 to 25. They're all the kind of like, I guess, cosmetic descriptions that we could give. But underneath all of that, we're actually talking about their personality traits, the way that they interact with the world around them, and how different it is to like generations above that, ours and upwards. So they're self-learners, they are intuitive, they teach themselves literally anything that they want via free education, methods. They are naturally incredibly curious. They're very, very well read and very well educated about kind of stuff that's going on in the world, not necessarily facts and figures, but like, the kind of things that we're taught in schools, but, what's happening in the news, what the latest kind of movements are. That is Gen Z.
Yeah, that's wicked. And I think it's interesting you framed it like that as well, because I think perhaps the perception when you start to talk about the kind of generations, that perhaps businesses might assume that Gen Z are kind of entry level, kind of potential employees. And when you think about that kind of age range, that pushes into a broader spectrum than just kind of entry level. And I love the piece around, kind of self-learning, because ultimately as well, right? Outside of the education system, there is so many opportunities to kind of learn and self-develop, with the advent of, kind of like even just things like YouTube and stuff like that, right? That are really helping to drive learning. So with that, Sam, you've answered the easier of the two questions, I think, which basically means that May gets to pick up the more controversial one, which is why next gen not on LinkedIn? Isn't everybody on LinkedIn?
That is true. No, everyone is on LinkedIn. I don't think we're saying that Gen Z haven't got an account on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is very good for certain things. I don't want to bash LinkedIn. But
you can a bit.
Yeah. It's too late. You already have.
But the reason why we're saying that is because it's purely what we're seeing. It's not Sam and I having an opinion here. It's actually talking to our community and finding out about what they use every day, what kind of platforms they're on every day, and how they see or how they believe that they get jobs, and find out about, I guess, their careers and futures. So I think what we've noticed is that they're definitely on kind of more social platforms. Like obviously social media they're on it daily. Like they were born on, with that. They are digital natives. Yeah. And so what is surprising for us is that why aren't companies kind of focusing on like promoting themselves on those kind of channels?
100%.
Whereas LinkedIn is probably definitely more corporate. What about the kind of creative individuals? I think it's like 50% of Gen Zers actually see themselves as creatives. So it's kind of understanding that, they completely, there's no kind of corporate, and the mix of what creative means is kind of changed in terms of the Gen Z kind of perspective, because they're creating all the time through, like you said, social media.
100%.
So I guess my first thought is, LinkedIn is too corporate. And it's just missing out on a lot of people.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. So you're kind of making the point there that they may have an account, but they're just not active on LinkedIn. They don't see it as a pathway to a potential job opportunity. Whereas on the flip side, if you look at kind of the recruitment kind of TA community, LinkedIn is like almost like the go-to kind of platform for kind of searching and kind of looking to source potential, kind of new employees. So that kind of disconnect, certainly how companies are kind of approaching their kind of recruitment and which channels they're utilizing, and equally how that might disconnect with actually next gen and how they want to engage and find job opportunities and learn more about companies. Well, that's a big issue, right? And I mean, previously we collectively have talked about job boards and their use or not use, as it were. And I think we'll come to that. But that segues neatly into, okay, you're talking about a community, you're kind of talking about what you've learned from your community. I think that segues neatly into, okay, what's Eric, and why was it established as a business?
Yes. So what is Eric? So when we set out to start Eric, it came about because of our own experiences. Like, we were just sick of not being able to get any career advice or any understanding of what the working world was like when we were at school. We were kind of relying on the limitations that our school career advisors had, but then I guess kind of their reluctance to use any third-party providers, or the fact that there were no third-party providers out there, at that time. And so we were just relying on this like single person at school to basically give us literally everything that there possibly is around careers, and like, you know, whatever you could do with your future is such an unrealistic idea, an unrealistic prospect, and actually is much better outsourced. So we basically decided to do that. We decided to create something that gave young people a kind of breadth of different knowledge, by connecting them with communities that were already providing that career advice, just not directly to schools or universities. This is where my like anti-uni thing comes in. I'm like, if I didn't go to university, I've got like nothing. Do you know what I mean? As soon as I leave school, it's like, off you go. And so yeah, so basically that's what Eric is. It's now an app. It used to be a series of events where we would get people to basically come into our events, influencers that were kind of like career influencers, career activists, self-development, you know, professionals. We'd get them to come to our events, and then companies would come in and leverage that education piece to connect with this future generation of talent so that they could plant the seed in their heads of, you know, it's employer branding, plant the seeds in their head of potentially being an employer for those young people. But obviously events it wasn't great last year. It didn't really happen.
A little bit more challenging.
So, yeah. So actually what we've done now is we've created a digital version of that. So it is a kind of on-demand careers hub where we have essentially handpicked the best influencer-led career content from across various different platforms in the internet. And we've just pulled them all into one place for young people to browse. You know, you can search for freelancer, you can search for music industry, you can search for whatever you want. Lots of different stuff created by different people so you can find what suits you. But for companies, it's amazing because they can align themselves with those influencers that they had no idea existed beforehand and get themselves on the radar of young people that aren't on LinkedIn. They aren't using job boards. They aren't on any other platforms that aren't designed to look like social media. That's the gap that it's filling.
That's awesome. And I think that content piece is a really interesting bit to kind of pick up on, in so much as even with the companies that I work with from a recruitment perspective, creating content is one of their biggest challenges. And actually, you know, not beyond, hey, we're hiring for this role, please join us or join the team, or something equally as kind of generic as that. And it can be quite challenging depending on which particular platform you're distributing on that. So I find some companies stay away from things like kind of Facebook. They stick to the more traditional things, perhaps like Twitter and kind of LinkedIn, etc. And then obviously kind of advertising on job boards. So how does it work in terms of, how did you know it would work in terms of kind of getting perhaps influencers from the community to help companies start to kind of create content or frame their I guess their value proposition beyond their normal kind of corporate brand? At what point did you know actually that's working? That seems to be really something that, you know, is quite powerful.
I think it's because we felt the problem ourselves. So when we were talking about the events, we were like, you know, yeah, we want some really cool companies to come along. Like I think we had Channel 4, we had like ITV, you know, big brands. But we didn't want to hear from the CEO of Channel 4 because his advice wasn't really relevant. Do you know what I mean? Like, so what we wanted to like know or hear from were the interns who had just got a job. So, you know, all of their advice was super, super relevant. And that's what we did. So we, you know, emailed all of the interns to be like, hey guys, do you want to come and talk at this careers event? And obviously they were like, yeah, like we've never been asked to be a speaker before. So they came down, and it was just, I think that was the kind of moment when we realized that actually, you know, it's peer-to-peer advice, which is so great. And like, I think people have been missing the trick of that. And maybe brands, I don't know, maybe they haven't trusted their juniors to kind of promote the brand for, but I think it really, really works. And that's kind of what we're trying to replicate on the app.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really interesting point, because ultimately, when you think about perhaps like kind of, should we say, what would be kind of jobs fairs, kind of recruitment fairs, or kind of virtual events, typically a business will be like, okay, let's get some senior folks there that know kind of what they're talking about and know how to frame the business and the brand. Let's get, you know, maybe kind of recruitment there just to make sure that we kind of we're framing the process for individuals. but actually maybe that they're not thinking about relatable individuals in their business that would connect more readily with perhaps the audience they're trying to engage with. And I think that's, I mean, when you started to introduce that kind of concept to companies, what was their initial reaction? You want our interns? You don't want the CEO?
I actually don't even think we asked them. We just went straight to the interns.
Straight to the intern.
Love that. No, that's cool. That's cool indeed. So, I mean, and collectively, under the banner of Eric, and we should just kind of doff our hats to Eric is an acronym for Sam. It's an acronym for.
Yes, again, you always put me on. It's always me. You are.
It changes every time.
It's because I look so nervous. How am I going to get it right? It stands for empower, represent, immerse, and create, which is essentially the process that we want all young people to have gone through by the time they get to the working world. They should feel empowered. They should feel represented. They should have been immersed in what the breadth of different things that you can do there is, and they should be able to create their own future.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. No, I think it's great because it links to that kind of how you built up the kind of community and the sort of, I guess, the ethos of kind of what you're looking to encourage. Because ultimately, what you're not saying is, hey, come here and we'll try and find you a job. It's like, hey, come here and we'll give you the information you need to start to own your own career path and actually think about and make that connection between, okay, cool, I understand where you're coming from in terms of what you want from your career. This is how traditional companies perhaps, or SMEs or scale ups would be thinking about you. So it's trying to marry the two to kind of make that connection. Because as we said, right, I think I read a stat that something like less than 4% of kind of Gen Zs are actually active on LinkedIn. And this is another great thing that you both do collectively. You push out a lot of content after speaking to your community. So you ask them about what's interesting to them, what's challenging them, what they're looking for. So it actually acts as a kind of education kind of community, education platform, if you will, which I think is fantastic. I read one that I thought was super interesting. So if we move to once they kind of join the workforce, it was like 73% prefer WhatsApp conversations as opposed to calls and texts. Now I'm just thinking, if you're a leader in a business, knowing that actually how best to kind of connect with that particular kind of pool of employees is going to be super powerful, right? Because it means a shift to your leadership style. And I was wondering whether there are any other kind of discoveries that notable discoveries and stats that you've kind of found that you want to kind of share now.
Yes, no, that's there are so many things. I think it's so interesting, this conversation about how you attract Gen Z, how do you get young people interested in your business, right? It can be so high level sometimes that there's just never anything immediately actionable that companies can do. And it's like, you watch a talk like this, right? And you're like, yeah, I mean, and it's great, but like, I have to get the sign off from my CEO for like a massive changes to the business if we want to make this like, but actually there are so many, like you said, like little actionable things that you can do now that will make a dramatic difference. Like I remember the one that May was mentioning to you a while ago, Glenn, which was, when you say smart casual, that can be so misleading for a young person in a job description, because they're like, you have to remember that these young people are coming into this with zero knowledge. They are coming in from a zero knowledge perspective. And so they are hugely intimidated as well. They know that they're up against like, hundreds, if not thousands of other young people for like a single job. They're doing everything that they're told, but they're also getting conflicting bits of advice from like everywhere that they go. So they're as confused as could possibly be. And so it's these small things, I think, about making it as clear as possible from your end, exactly what you're looking for. Smart casual means give some visual examples of what that is. Send them a little thing so that they're, saying, if you arrive to the office, like, please sit down, but don't be afraid to ask someone up at reception if you think that someone might be late. I don't know, like there are small little like personality, like humanizing things that you can do to help these young people.
Definitely. And I remember, May, you sort of saying about when it comes to kind of applications, that you noticed a kind of trend, and the community fed back to you that they were actually changing almost their style and language, I think it was, to
yeah, that's like professional lingo, I guess. It's, you know, they're trying to, I mean, I guess coming back to the LinkedIn debate, I think one of the things that we realize is that in this kind of professional world or working world, you know, young people feel like they have to be a version of themselves that maybe they're not. And I think that that's what LinkedIn does, is like everyone's profile is a little bit, you know, inauthentic, because we, I guess that you're obviously trying to be your best self. So how do you kind of show that you are authentic, show you're passionate, show like, basically they're probably scared to be, you know, themselves. So yeah, I think it's like, how can companies aid that? How can they help young people feel like they can be honest?
Well, Stephen's just come in. He was like, he's got. Oh, come on. Yeah, exactly. I would really expect candidates to find out for themselves, to know how to handle themselves in interview. That's the first initiative test. I mean, yes. I think it's.
That's a fair point.
I guess it depends on kind of how. Well, I guess is what you're kind of looking for from the individual, right? How inclusive you are. If you're putting a lot of information out around kind of getting the context and, you know, kind of how to enter an interview right, then actually you're probably gonna get a really good quality interview, right? I mean, I think, you know, nerves will get the better of people, and even those slightest things like. And I'm not talking to like everybody being a really fragile personality, Stephen, but you know, sometimes if you're super conscious of the fact you're going into an interview, and you go in and you maybe, you know, you go to the wrong floor or the wrong reception, and people are like, oh no, it's got to be there, etc., etc. Those things can just chip at your confidence a little bit, because you start to get a little bit flustered, and it takes you out of that kind of sense of flow that you're going into for an interview. But what are your thoughts on that comment?
Well, I also think smart casual is like a good example. Like, it means completely different things for different offices. Smart casual for an advertising firm is completely different to a law firm. And so if someone did turn up, if they Google smart casual and their search result was bringing up suit and tie, but like, a suit, but not a tie, and then they turned up to an advertising industry interview in a suit, that advertiser would probably end up being like, you know, they're probably a bit too corporate to work here. Like, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't as a young person. And they're just doing their best, trying. And these are basic bits of information that companies do have access to, and they do have knowledge, you know, and they can just extend that small, simple, like, effort, I suppose, to make, exactly as you said, Glenn, the lives of that young person more comfortable, more easier, and also, give them a better result in the interview as a result.
Definitely. Stephen's just come back. I would give, you know, slack to younger candidates, but we're talking 16 to 25 here, right? So at the top end of that 25, that's not young. I mean, that's a very, you know, mature adult. It's I think this perhaps links into the kind of content piece, right? So, you know, I'll come to you, May, in terms of, you know, companies have an opportunity to create content that illustrates their culture, their environment, which actually can, rather than please wear, you know, kind of shirt, tie, if you start to see the people in a business and them talking about the business, that's an educational tool that sets a benchmark for somebody that's potentially applying, right? Surely.
Totally. Yeah, no, exactly. And I think it's not, you know, literally having here's what to wear, here's not what to wear, like, you know, black and white. I think it's just, at least there is something to look at and something to engage with, that as a potential, you know, employee or someone who's interested in your company, at least, because it's so hard to get an idea of what a company is from their LinkedIn, from their career website. Some companies don't even have a career website. So at least just give something for them to just, like, you know, use and at least try and have an understanding so that they can perform well.
Definitely. So where does the kind of benefit of kind of partnering with an influencer in the community benefit a company? I mean, what does that do for them?
I think for me, like, kind of going back to my background, you know, I was the only Asian girl in my school, right? I didn't have any Asian role models or kind of people who look like me, and I think that's where it kind of starts. It's are you getting advice from people that you trust and relate to? And whatever they're saying, it doesn't really matter. I mean, we look at influencers now with advertising, you know, advertising goods and shoes and whatever. Like, it's so powerful to hear and learn from someone that looks like you and that you feel like, you know, you can relate to. So I think that's just an interesting concept there that I think maybe recruitment hasn't really thought of in terms of how can they leverage that, especially when it comes to diversity. Like, you know, is there ways that companies can really get all of their employees involved and try and find, you know, use them as kind of resources to be like, what challenges have you felt, and what's your background, and what's your experience, and how can you teach someone else, like your younger versions? Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
100%, yeah. Do you think that sometimes companies think about kind of content creation on this massive scale? Like, we need this massive kind of marketing content plan, and then we can execute on it, etc. And they don't really think about kind of micro pieces of content, which could be equally powerful and interesting. Is that something you kind of find in the community as well?
Yeah, I think actually the difficult thing for the companies, like we found, is that lots of them are creating this amazing content and they're putting it out on their career websites, but their young people are not going to their career websites, or they're not following them on social media, because social media is not a platform that is designed basically for, I guess, kind of that purpose. It's designed to distract and sell you stupid products, and, you know, like that's kind of it really. Like, it's not designed to add value to you in any way really. And so that's the problem really, is that these companies are putting a lot of time, effort and money into creating these resources, these, you know, insights into what it's like to work in the company, like what their latest, you know, manifesto is. And, you know, they're putting so much of this into this, but young people are not seeing it. And that's exactly what our platform is kind of designed for. If you do have a diversity and inclusion initiative that you've been, you know, putting loads of effort into, and, you know, money and time, then, you know, there is an effective place now that you can advertise it explicitly to young people, because LinkedIn is not doing the trick. Young people are not on LinkedIn, and social media is not designed for that purpose. There is a gap there that needs to be filled, that we are filling. We've noticed that. And to May's point as well, like the added value for companies as well, like we all know that employer branding cuts your recruitment costs by like half or something silly like that. And so companies are waking up to this. They're like, yeah, we do need to put more effort into our marketing as an employer, because you know what, like we can create consumers at the same time and we can save money, you know, in the long term. And so we're hoping that our platform will provide that on-demand employer branding for any size of company. So at any size now of a company, like you can create those resources and you can get it in front of young people effectively who are looking for what you are creating.
I think that's the interesting piece, right? Hate to burst some, you know, companies' bubble, but these individuals are not on Indeed, they're not on Glassdoor, they're not on Reed looking for jobs, they're not on LinkedIn looking at your really cool videos. They may discover it maybe on Instagram or Facebook through some related kind of channel, but they're not necessarily, it's not, those platforms are not like a concentrated area for, you know, this next gen, you know, individual that you want to engage with. And I think if anybody is listening and maybe, you know, in the chat channel thinking, next gen, come on, I mean, how important is that? I mean, there's multiple other generations in the workplace. Well, you know, you said this to me, Sam, right? TikTok are just about to double down on a kind of job site targeted at Gen Z, right? So, you know, what's your thoughts there, folks? I mean, you know, do you think that's going to work? What's your thinking around that? Because that was recent, wasn't it? It was in May. I think they kind of mentioned about it.
Yeah, it was really recent. Yeah. So, well, it's great because it's total market validation for us. We know that we're in the right area. We know that we're thinking in terms of what on earth, you know, what our young people want, what do they want to be using, and what do companies want to use? People, both sides of the coin, are sick of stale, badly branded stuff. And so there is obviously demand out there for something that is sexy, that is, you know, creating consumers at the same time, but is adding value to both sides. I think that's really important. At the moment, the majority of platforms are only adding value to the companies, and as a result, young people are fucking hating it. Sorry.
Yeah, it's totally cool, because I think
so passionate.
Yeah, exactly, and that's it, right? It's the fact that, you know, it's validation of the fact that career advice, college level, school level, college level, is crap. It's rubbish. Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't know about you. I think I can barely recall my career advice kind of sessions at kind of school and college, and that's not due to my age. It's just the lack of any impact it had on me in terms of guiding me in my career. And I think, you know, to your point, the validation around Eric and the community and the approach is there, in so much as big companies like TikTok are double down on it. They're like, career advice is crap, and we want to service this for our community, right? Exactly. And I think it's kind of, I think it's fascinating, right? And then it links into kind of, okay, recruitment, HR. Are you investing your money in the right channels for your kind of your employees? And I know you've got some strong kind of thoughts around that, but okay, so let me flip it around. If I'm kind of in a TA function, recruitment function, HR function now, I'm listening to you both. I'm like, okay, cool. How do I approach this? What's my I've got this kind of traditional kind of framework for kind of recruitment and sourcing and everything along those lines. How am I going to integrate something like this, like a community thing, for me to access potential employees? And how much curation will I have to do of that? How time consuming? And time is a big thing for kind of recruitment, right? Time efficiency. What would you say to them? What would be your initial kind of advice beyond don't be scared?
Contact us, we'll help you out.
Yeah. Sales pitch 101.
Yeah. Well, no, in all seriousness though, like we are heavily into teaming up companies with influencers who they have no idea are out there and they have no idea exist, but are heavily and closely aligned to what that company's values are and what they do. And so their audience, that influencer has an audience, a large audience of people who will actively be looking for what that company is doing and you know, like the jobs that they have. It's just both sides don't know that each other exists. That's the problem. There is a connection issue there that we are solving with that influencer in the middle. That influencer has access to those young people that you're looking for. Cool. Anyway, this is May's area though.
I was going to say that I guess it's less scary because we're not asking companies to build a community from scratch. And that's what, you know, Instagram, Twitter, that's really why companies aren't on Instagram as much, because they're like, oh God, I've got 1 follower. How do I make it, you know, 1 million followers? But that's the beauty of it. Like Sam said, you don't need to build a community. All of these influencers have done that already for you over the last couple of years. You now just need to align yourself with the right influencers, whether that's industry, you know, interest, skills, whatever you're kind of looking for. And it's simple. It's literally at partnerships, joining communities like Eric, or like there are so many of these communities out there, and it is easy. It really is easy. It might seem daunting, but it is easy.
Yeah. And no one's been given the tools to do it yet. That's the problem, is that everyone goes down the job board route, where it's like, oh, you need to solve, you know, the problem with accessing Gen Z, create another job board with another weird little side slogan attached to it with some sort of jazzy angle. It's just a jobs board at the end of the day. Like, young people are still not going to use it, but they are there, like they're existing in other spaces.
And this is the thing around kind of like perhaps some of the traditional approaches to kind of, let's call it kind of talent community engagement. A lot of it is potentially quite passive, right? You know, careers page, like you said, you've got to kind of be intentionally looking for that company to sometimes find that careers page, unless they're kind of promoting it across social media. And even then you're like, well, actually, I don't want to be channeled to a career page. I actually want to see some relevant, relatable content before I start searching for job opportunities. And that comes into almost like the kind of almost discover, attract, engage kind of process. First challenge for companies is, how do we get discovered? If we're, you know, if we're using all these traditional channels, how do we get discovered? How do we stand out from every other company that's perhaps using these channels? Then how do we attract these individuals to our brand and how do we attract them to get them to learn more about us? And then finally, how do we engage them? And I think what you're saying is actually the community approach actually accelerates that process quite quickly, as opposed to they maybe find or discover you on LinkedIn. It's just like, okay. And then they go down this path of, cross different channels before they actually finally arrive at maybe making a decision to apply. Then the point comes, they apply and they hear nothing. Right. So how are you kind of within the community? I mean, is there a kind of set of principles and rules whereby if a company's on there, they have to engage? Again, it's not like just pitching up a careers page and just expecting this flood of interest from the community. They've got to be proactive, right? They've got to contribute to the community to get some engagement back. Is that the way it's working?
Yeah, exactly. It's just little bits of information that kind of just reminds the community that you guys exist, because that's the number one thing. Like, we actually had a company recently. They wanted to hire, I think it was like over 50. They had 50 roles basically, and they've used job boards, they've used LinkedIn, they've used everything. And in 2 weeks, they actually hired all 50 through the Eric community.
Amazing.
But purely because all of the people that they hired, they didn't actually know the brand before.
Right.
And the moment that there was an educational piece of content there, which I think was just like a video or an article explaining what the company does and is and what, who they are, that's when they actually found all of these people that they didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
So I think that's just really powerful. Yeah.
Definitely. And I don't know if this is on the product roadmap yet, already integrated, but how do kind of people in the community engage with the companies within the community as well? Is it kind of a direct conversational chat channel? Is it a little bit more fluid than email to email or LinkedIn email in or something along those lines? Because then you can have your kind of true voice then, right? It's a conversation as opposed to an application.
Yeah, so it's actually, you can follow companies and then you can keep up to date with what they're doing. There will be a messaging feature eventually, but we're actually quite keen to keep it quite kind of like just adding value to the young people, making them feel like it's a safe space that they could just explore, basically without feeling like someone's breathing down their neck permanently, like you do on LinkedIn, being like, got to be on my best behavior, got to be on my best behavior,
Yeah.
So it's actually really important, and that is something that's always been really requested by our community. So we're implementing our community of young people. So we're implementing a community feature, a forum feature, kind of like a Reddit, but it's specifically about career advice and collaborations. But that is again along that safe space theme, where it is young people can recommend bits of content to each other around specific themes, or they can be like, oh, I just had 6 rejections in a row, guys, I'm really sad, like, can someone help me out here? Like, are there any companies that are hiring at the moment? Like peer-to-peer recommendations without companies basically getting involved. So that's kind of along those lines of around the ethos of what we're doing. We want young people to feel safe, and we don't want them to feel pressured. We want them to be able to explore. Definitely.
And I think there's a big, I mean, even in kind of traditional recruitment circles, the power of a referral is always evident, right? If, somebody you know and you trust kind of refers you or points you in the direction of a particular business, it almost immediately has some level of credibility by that referral. So within a community perspective, equally, the power of the referral is going to be 2, 3, 10-fold. But equally, companies need to be mindful of, like you said, not ghosting, right? Which is a big issue in kind of recruitment. People apply, they maybe have an initial conversation and then nothing. And almost a community element keeps you right? You do need to be thinking continually about how you represent yourself. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly.
No, definitely. I was going to say, like, because companies have profiles on the app, it's that chance to actually build a relationship with the company first. So at least if the company does ghost you at the end of the day, you already kind of have built that relationship before, so you kind of don't feel so bad if they ghost you.
Fair play. So I'm kind of conscious of time. We've got five more minutes before we wrap up. I was wondering whether there was any just kind of initial advice you might give to companies just to kind of getting them thinking about this approach, right? This community approach, and kind of potentially engaging with Eric as well. Maybe give us a bit of a view of how your initial conversations go with companies when you start to kind of get engaged with them? What kind of advice do you give them? What kind of steer do you give them?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Well, I guess we normally start with just asking all the companies, like, what current channels do you use?
Yeah.
And I think what we've realized is that everyone does use the same. You know, it is the job boards, it is the LinkedIn's, it is going to schools and doing talks, or, you know, these kind of like short bursts of activation. And so I think when we talk about Eric's platform and the influencer kind of, I guess, USP, I think everyone's just really, I guess they've never really heard about it before. So I think, like, we always just, you know, go back to you know, using influencers as part of advertising. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same model. It's just, you know, aligning yourself with the right influencer, and reaching audiences that they've never reached before.
Yeah. Do you sense a level of nervousness of them coming away from their kind of traditional approach? How do you kind of give them some comfort around that?
Well, actually, everyone is so excited to be able to use something sexy and new. I think that's what we like. That's really spurred us on. I think is that we know that companies are sick of all the stuff that they're, you know, confined to, that they're limited to at the moment. And you know, this idea that there is something that actually, I think as well, like, we really want to make HR like sexy again. Like, we genuinely do, you know, like, I think it's, you know, they are limited by the tools that they've been given, and it's actually really unfair, you know, like, there's not that much innovation around that kind of area. We were like, sorry, I actually can't remember what I was going to say, but I just got really overexcited by the HR is sexy kind of vibe.
But like you said, I think it's a really valid point, because HR and recruitment needs to continually iterate and innovate, right? To think about the job that the functions have around continually bringing great quality people into a business that, you know, is continually evolving itself, right? So you can't just remain, and this is probably what happened to a degree pre LinkedIn, you know, the adoption of kind of social media for recruitment and HR, right? They were utilizing careers pages, job boards, and then obviously they adopted kind of LinkedIn, social channels, which gave them a, you know, an additional kind of move towards accessing new talent pools, and then obviously platforms. Now they've got to be thinking about how do we engage with the leaders who will be the future of our business, and to dismiss Gen Z and next gen as just, oh, well, you know, that's kind of almost like a buzzword. Well, people do that about millennials, right? And they're all over your business now. Yeah. So unless you understand how to engage with next gen, you're going to have this kind of push and pull around how does our business continue to operate and evolve.
Yeah, I do remember what I was going to say as well, like, on that point. Like, I know everyone is just sick of having to let people down. Like, being in a position of HR is like, you know, a large part of the job is not that nice, you know, having to say no to people and be like, sorry, we can't give you a job this time. Like, that's not a nice thing to do. Like, imagine if that could be like completely transformed, and every time you said no to someone, they'd be like, oh, you know what, it doesn't really matter, because I really had a lot of value added to me in this process, so I've gone away a better person. Like, it doesn't matter. Having a no doesn't really matter to me anymore. Like, that's what we're trying to do. That's what needs to change.
Wow, that is super powerful, and a really, really great way to end the show. So, May, Sam, absolutely awesome to have you both on the show. Thank you so much for investing your time. Where can people connect with you best to essentially kind of follow up if they're interested in the conversation with you individually, together, about Eric? I know you have got a LinkedIn profiles, because obviously you have to for the business. But you know, what's the kind of best way? Would LinkedIn be the best way, or, you know, can we find you on kind of Instagram and stuff like that?
Yeah, LinkedIn's great. You can also go on our website, which is meet-eric.com, or you can just email us directly. So it's just May or Sam at meeteric.com. So I'm sure I can put it in the chat, actually.
Yeah, well, what I'll do, I'll ping a post after the show, and just kind of put and connect you guys into it again, just for people to follow up. But it's been super interesting. May, Sam. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing what happens with Eric going forward. That's for sure.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Thanks,
Wicked.
Glenn.
And I just want to say thanks to everybody that joined us today. Super appreciate the kind of comments and questions in the chat channel. It's been great. And I wish you all a very happy afternoon. Hump day. Take care for now.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.